and I'm standing at the red light. And it's not red anymore. Ciao, I'm Mario, the Swiss Car Guy on YouTube, and today it's going to be a little driving around rant video. Today I want to talk about manual transmissions. And in previous videos, numerous times, I've stated that I prefer an automatic to a manual transmission most of the time. And I always get these comments like, this guy doesn't know how to drive, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and blah, 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 blah. And in this video, I just want to talk to all the guys who almost religiously advocate for manual transmissions. And it's usually guys. I haven't met a lot of women who are this fanatic about manual transmissions. I want to say one thing. Me liking automatic transmissions over manuals doesn't make me any less of a car guy than anybody else. Because it's the same thing as you liking power steering doesn't make you less of a car guy than somebody who likes manual steering. You liking climate control doesn't make you less of a car guy than somebody who prefers to sweat in their cars. You can spin it as far as telling people, well, you drive a car and not a horse and a carriage, which makes you less of a driving enthusiast than these people. But no, I prefer automatic transmissions. And today is a pretty good example because I'm driving in city traffic, and with an automatic it's really easy. With a manual, yes, I agree, it might be more engaging, but is city traffic really the place where you want to be engaged in driving? Me, I just prefer to, sit here in comfort, maybe listen to some good song, maybe watch a video, of course not while I'm moving. But in city driving, a manual makes no sense. And to be very honest, even in spirited driving, I think a manual doesn't make sense. A manual is one of those things that you like because you like them. It's like, yes, it is more engaging because you have to do more work for, achieving the same result. But since when is doing more work ever desirable? I guess I could go down to the river to wash my clothes. It would be more engaging than just having it being done by a washing machine, but I think most people would not prefer to do that. And it's the same with manuals versus automatics. We live now in an age where most people prefer an automatic if they have the choice. And the reason is quite simple, because not only are automatics more comfortable, yes, you need to be less of a good driver to drive an automatic car, but also, I remember when I was younger, automatics were usually pretty bad cars. An automatic transmission would slow a car down quite substantially. Therefore, if you also look at cars from the 70s, even from the 80s, usually you have a manual version and you have an automatic version, and the automatic version is worth a lot less because those cars used to be a lot slower, like the automatic being a second slower from 0 to 100 or something like that. And honestly, with modern automatics, it's the other way around. The automatic is usually faster than the manual, and of course, you get the added benefit of comfort. Therefore, it's no wonder most people nowadays opt for automatic transmissions. Now you might say, well, Mario, you just like automatic transmissions because you don't know how to properly shift a manual. Well, like most people in Europe, I learned to drive on a manual. I passed my driver's test on a manual, and I have driven manuals for extensive periods of time. I reckon I've done at least 200,000 kilometers on manual cars. And during that time, I really haven't needed a new clutch once. So I reckon that I know how to drive a manual, but I still prefer an automatic because nowadays automatics, they are very fast. They are even apparently more efficient, even though the only car I really have statistics about, my Porsche 911 Turbo, which was a manual, I actually managed to drive that car more economically than the manufacturer's rated fuel consumption figures. So I was below that, which is something I've never been able to do with any of my automatic cars. So I'm not so sure about that. I also think that automatics are easier to tune for the WLTP, for the fuel consumption measurement figures. You can tune the automatic in a certain way that you get lowest consumption, lowest emissions, and that apparently sells cars nowadays. Whereas with a manual, it always depends a lot on the driver. But there is also the problem, because nowadays more and more manufacturers have stopped offering the manual cars. And one of the reasons for that is in fact that the manufacturers are optimizing their cars for emissions. And it's easier to optimize for an automatic car than for a manual, especially because on an automatic, modern cars usually have 8 or even more speeds, or like this thing here is a CVT, so you have like an infinity of speeds. But a manual, you know, even 7 gears is already quite a lot. And usually from personal driving experience, I think it's too many gears. But you cannot really do a 10-speed manual or something like that, so you cannot really optimize that much in that way, and therefore this is one of the reasons why the manual is going the way of the dodo. But the other reason, I reckon that is the far more important reason, is that a overwhelming majority of people are not buying manuals anymore. And this might be a trend that's coming over from America, because Europe has traditionally been a place where people drive manuals, but this is really changing, and changing fast. And I mean, I can understand it, because automatics tend to be quite good nowadays. And I know there's always the guys who scream, they don't offer that new model with a manual, why? It's usually because the guys who scream, they are a very small but very vocal minority. I mean, personally, I like offering the consumer choice. You want the manual? Order a manual. The thing is, from an automotive manufacturer standpoint, I mean, you produce what the people will buy. So if there is a strong demand for manuals, you'd be stupid not to offer manuals. But apparently there isn't a demand strong enough. And the guys who scream so loud, they don't seem to be buying a lot of manuals, at least not new cars. Because many of us car enthusiasts, we tend to be a bit of, you know, cheapskates in the way that, hey, we are not rich, and we tend to buy most of our cars used. And I think there is a disproportionate amount of used car buyers that would prefer a manual, but those guys do not buy the new cars. So a manufacturer is obviously not going to build a car for the used car market, but for the new car buyer. Therefore, since the new car buyers prefer automatics, they produce automatics. And then, even if they did produce a manual, nowadays you have the little problem with emissions, because everybody and everything is focused on emissions and low emissions. And it's funny that even since emissions have become that much a focus, even fuel consumption has gone up. I mean, cars around 5 to 10 years ago used to actually use less fuel than they do now, because in order to improve the emission figure, the cars tend to burn a bit more fuel. So emissions is everything, and this also has consequences for new cars being offered with manual transmissions, because the cars need to have low emissions ratings, they need to pass their emissions tests, and therefore the cars nowadays, they are geared towards lower emissions, which means they become less sprightly to drive and actually less engaging, which is the main reason why you would want a manual. Therefore, even if you can buy a manual nowadays, chances are that it either is very compromised as gearing wise, or that it has like 7 gears like modern Porsche 911s or, you know, a C7 Corvette. So basically my point is that if you prefer an automatic, it's completely okay, and it's very legitimate even from a car guy perspective, because let's be honest, if you're looking at objectively, an automatic is better than a manual. It is smoother, it is more comfortable, it is faster nowadays. It will most likely also lead to better fuel economy and emissions. But of course, I can understand that from an engagement point of view, driving a manual is something a few people might prefer. And it's perfectly legitimate. And it's just as legitimate as other people not preferring to drive manual cars. So if it hasn't come across yet, my mantra is live and let live. We can all be car guys, we can all be knowledgeable the same, but we can have different preferences. Personally, I always think of myself as liking, you know, big power sports cars, but I find myself enjoying driving this car most, which is a comfortable, still reasonably powerful hybrid. I mean, think of that. Usually a word that makes every car enthusiast cringe, but I love this car. And it's not because, ooh, I don't know anything else, this is the only good car I've ever driven. No, I've driven plenty of cars. This is just what I like. And I think it's good not to like the same things, because otherwise we'd be all driving the same box. And, oh, this is kind of a stupid traffic jam and I don't like it. Come on. But my point basically is, it's okay to have different preferences. You liking something that I don't like doesn't make you less of a car guy than me, and the same vice versa. Because we just have to understand that there's different opinions on things. And just because somebody has a different opinion than you doesn't mean that they are stupid and they don't know nothing. I mean, even when I drove that Z4M Coupe, I said that it would probably be better with an automatic because the gearbox was not that great anyway. And when I spoke to the owner about it, I asked him, is it just your gearbox that has a bit of problem, that's a bit notchy? And he went, no, they are all that way. They are not great manual gearboxes. So I went like, okay, I still get it. You can still prefer the act of, clutching and changing gears manually, but the thing is also most manual gearboxes, they are not as good as you think they are. I mean, usually when you think of manual gearboxes, you think of something like the loading mechanism on a Winchester rifle, like where it's just snappy and goes into gear. But most gearboxes, most manuals, they are kind of like not very precise, they are notchy. It's not a great experience. And even on cars that you would expect have fantastic gear changes, for example, the famed open gate Ferrari shifter, those gearboxes, they are not that great because the changes are quite long throw, and the gearbox, especially on the 550s and even on the 360s, they can be quite temperamental, meaning that if the engine, or let's say if the gearbox and the gearbox oil is cold, sometimes you cannot even get into second gear. And I mean, this is very engaging, obviously, but it's also very annoying. And I think this is also a reason why many owners of these supercars, of these Ferraris, Lamborghinis of the past, didn't drive the cars as much. This is why you have now 30-year-old cars with 20,000 kilometers. I'm sure they were not all just saving up because they expected the value to explode. I think just for many of them, driving them was a bit too much of a chore, and so they didn't drive them that much. And in fact, I mean, the newer cars, obviously they will be more reliable and more refined, but I see that the new, the dual clutch cars, you find them with much higher mileages. For example, I see Ferrari 458 Italias with like 150,000 kilometers. And I don't know if I've ever seen like a 308 or a 328 or an F355 with a manual having been driven that much. People obviously like automatics, and you might say, well, those are just the sheep, those are the people who are not really car enthusiasts. But then again, I would counter, well, who if not a car enthusiast buys a Ferrari? But then again, that's just my way of thinking. My message in the end, as stated before, all I wanted to say is it's okay to like different things. It's okay to have different opinions, because that's what makes the world interesting. Otherwise, we'd be all driving Lexus LS600Hs, where the check cruise control message comes up because the cruise control randomly deactivates every, 10 minutes or so. But that would be boring, wouldn't it? Therefore, I stand by it. I prefer to drive cars with automatic gearboxes, but I can understand everybody who doesn't. Even some people who drive manual diesel wagons. But that's a topic for another video. What is your opinion on this? Are you very religious about the kind of transmission your car uses, or are you laid back, or maybe do you like different transmissions in different situations? Please comment down below, let me know. And if you like this video, please leave a like, share it with somebody who might be interested in it. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, bye. Wow, we never made it to the end of the traffic jam. I mean, I hope I make it at some time, but the video stops now before we make it up there.